Hey, everybody. Thanks for joining us today. I am Karen Blum, the beat leader for Health Information Technology for AHCJ. And this program is one of a series of webinars focused on timely health, and in this case, health tech topics in the news to help you with your coverage. Today's topic is how journalists can put ChatGPT to good use. I'm sure many of you may have read about ChatGPT, or maybe some of you are using it yourself. For people who don't know, ChatGPT is an artificial intelligence chatbot released last year in November. It quickly became the fastest growing app, reaching about 100 million users in its first 2 months. Like other chatbots, the program is designed to simulate conversation, and its technology can allow it to produce human-like text. But what are its implications for journalism? How can it be harnessed to help and not replace us? I'm very pleased to introduce our guest expert for today, Alex Mahadevan. Alex is director of MediaWise at the Poynter Institute. He has taught digital media literacy to thousands of teenagers and older adults and trained journalists across the world in verification and digital tools for investigations. And he is going to give us a live demonstration of ChatGPT during our program. So I think the format for today, I have a couple of opener questions for Alex. Then we're going to let him take it away, and then we'll circle back. And we want to make sure we allow time to answer all of your questions. So please put those in the Q&A box so that we can get to those as many as we can. So Alex, I wonder if you can help maybe describe in simple terms, how does ChatGPT work?
It's very hard to do in simple terms, but I will do my best. So before going any further, so beyond my work with MediaWise, I spent a long time as a local news reporter and data journalist, and a lot of the applications that you'll hear today, there's always a little bit of kind of data journalism in it. So I'd be interested to know how many data reporters we have here, but really ChatGPT can do a lot for any beat, any skill level. Really, it can do a ton. Don't worry, it's not going to replace you. So I hope the show today is really what I want you to come away with today is ultimately enough of an understanding of ChatGPT and what you can do with it that, like, when your editor or the publisher or the hedge fund or whatever goes around and starts trying to replace people, you're like, wait, no, I can do all that even better than ChatGPT. So what it is, how it works is, really on its face, it's a chat bot. You go to ChatGPT and you ask it a question. What is a recipe for Thai food I can make tonight? And it spits it out. Now, where did that recipe come from? It came from lots and lots and lots and lots and lots and lots of other recipes that the AI-driven program behind it has scraped from the internet. So to even step further back, I don't know how many of you are familiar with AI or how artificial intelligence works, but it's essentially this kind of, it is the process by which this computer program is pulling in all of this data and training itself. So back to the recipe, it has all of this data that has scraped from all over the internet. So pulled everything from, a website with a bunch of recipes on it to like Google searches that people have done to research papers that someone has written about Thai food, if possible, speeches that someone has given about Thai food. And they pull all that together, and then ChatGPT, the chatbot, spits out the best answer to the question. Now, the question I asked is very, very vague, and we'll get into why you want to be more specific. So that's like a general overview of like how it works. Basically, it's a chatbot that takes a bunch of data. It's digested before the end of 2021. That's important, and tries to give you the best answer it thinks that you're asking for.
Right. And do you have a sense of how commonly this is being used today by journalists and newsrooms?
I think it depends on the newsroom, and it's hard to gauge right now because I think there is a little bit of a hesitancy for people to admit that they are using ChatGPT. infrastructure that ChatGPT is based on, this generative AI text, is being used by news organizations right now. And I'm sure you all have seen the news stories about these like online news sites that are putting, like Red Ventures is a big company that started doing AI generated stock articles. Just the other day, Deadspin put out an AI generated article on like ranking Star Wars, and it was full of errors. So I think right now there's such a negative view of ChatGPT and generative AI that people won't admit it, but people are using it. I know data journalists are using it to generate FOIA requests, which I can talk a little bit more about. I run a newsroom of teenagers called the Teen Fact Checking Network, and I know they are using quite a bit. Even if they aren't admitting it, I can tell like in their copy. I recently heard of there was a college journalism professor who spotted ChatGPT use by her student because the student forgot to delete the part that says paste into like copy paste. So it was this whole paper, and then at the bottom it said like regenerate prompt and like copy into, so that's a long-winded way of saying that I think more people are using it than they will admit, but I have to say probably way too few journalists know how it works and are using it effectively.
Right. And then I just watched the other day, there was a program by the Online News Association talking about some uses of it. And according to their panelists, they thought some of the best uses, at least right now, would be for things that would be data heavy. So like searching police blotter or weather updates, or, for a smaller news organization, like listing town council meetings and when they're being held. Is that something you would agree with? That like right now it's for these data heavy?
Yeah, absolutely. What I will say and build onto that, and I think we're going to all have to grapple with this, is ChatGPT's ability to be a bit of a storyteller. Like I will use it to generate like Python code to do something that I want it to do. But I have also used ChatGPT. I'm a nonprofit director of a very, very, very small organization, and we were applying for a very large grant to do a media literacy program for 2 years in Bulgaria. And we had never done anything like this before. And there's this 100-page grant process that I had to fill out. And you had to do a risk analysis, a gender inclusion analysis, all of this really, really complicated stuff that a small nonprofit or maybe a small newsroom doesn't have the resources for. So I will talk a lot about limitations because there are a ton of limitations, but it can be a really good starting point for crafting boring copy, automating the boring stuff that you need to work on. Beyond the data heavy stuff is it can summarize really complicated research papers, articles, your own work. It can help put things into, most of the time, what it thinks is simple English for your readers. So I do think while it's basically, it's definitely most helpful and most practical and honestly most ethical right now to use on really internal data work. Its abilities go beyond that with limitations and caveats, of course.
And then you referenced earlier that some of the information that it spits out may be inaccurate or potentially outdated. Is it safe to trust the information that ChatGPT will spit back to you, or do we still have to do our own due diligence as journalists to verify facts?
You do. Yeah, unfortunately, it's still, ChatGPT is awful at what experts call hallucinating. It will come up with facts and quotes that it thinks that are true and spoken by real people. There have been lawyers that have been busted using ChatGPT because the program brought up fake cases, and they went to reference the case and they were like, oh, this this case does not exist. And it was like, oh, the lawyer actually tried to use ChatGPT, doubled down on it and tried to create a case and was like, oh, I just don't think it was ever filed. I don't know. So the limitations are it hallucinates, it creates facts that are not actual facts. It creates misinformation many times. I did an experiment where I created an entire news organization, complete with reporters and their headshots, articles, the code to build the website and everything in like a half an hour, and created this entirely fake news organization very shortly. And I started trying to create fake news articles, and it just kept trying to tell me that the mayor of St. Pete is a guy named Rick Baker, who has not been mayor for like a very long time. And there were lots of other facts that it kept trying to tell me that were facts and are not facts at all.
Interesting. And are there other limitations that our audience should know about?
There are a lot. I think the biggest thing is the misinformation that it can generate and does generate. So there is a good amount of fact checking that you need to do for anything public facing that you use ChatGPT for. It doesn't have, ChatGPT specifically does not have any data moving after like the end of 2021, because all of the data it was trained on is older. So if you are, for example, like if I'm trying to write up a grant report and I want to reference some media literacy research from last year, I can't do that. I can't ask it to do that. It will come up. It will probably try to create something out of thin air, which is the trouble there. But it, you know, the lag in the data is another big limitation. So those two, and then honestly, just it's very bad at context and creativity, journalistic writing. I think anyone here who's worked with very green journalists, you would pull your hair out reading copy generated by ChatGPT. Even if you tell it, pretend you are, write like a journalist and write me an article about XYZ, it's just so incredibly boring and lacking context. And it really loves to tell and not show, which is, you know, that's part of the limitation. It is not good at drawing out context or doing anything beyond what you specifically ask it to do.
And then can we talk about some of the ethical concerns potentially with using this? You know, is this something we need to be concerned about, plagiarism or other issues?
Yeah, so I have not seen any specific instances of someone like doing something in ChatGPT and publishing it, which you really should never do, and I'll explain more. And then being hit with like plagiarism issues because it maybe copied something and spit it back out. I have not personally encountered it. I think I heard one case of it, but so I have not run into specific plagiarism issues. On the ethical side of things, it can get really hairy if you are writing about somebody and it hallucinates a fact about that person that is incorrect. So that has happened before. I can't recall the specific case, but there was I think it was a younger, I don't know if it was a journalist. I think it might've been someone writing a press release or something. And they were writing about the background of some professor. And in the background, ChatGPT said the professor had been like accused of harassment or something like that, and it ended up in the press release. And so this professor, like, I think got like a Google alert and was like, "Oh my, like what the?" There are just a ton of ethical concerns in using ChatGPT for anything that is public facing. Any word, any letter that you copy out of the ChatGPT terminal and put in front of the public is iffy. It's there, you know, transparency too. You know, I mean, I think, especially being a media literacy organization, and I think trust audience trust is really built through transparency. And I don't think people like to be fed AI content at all. So navigating how to be transparent about your use of AI is another big ethical issue that I think we are all still grappling with, because the tech is just way too new.
Mhm. Okay, and I know we're on a limited time today. I want to make sure we maximize your time and get to audience questions. So Alice, can you do your demonstration for us and just kind of show us how this works?
Yeah, well, let me answer this. Hold on, we did have a question come in, and please, everyone who I'd be curious actually in the chat if you could drop in a number on a scale of 1 to 5, 1 being you have no idea what ChatGPT is, you've never used it, 5 being you use it often and consider yourself pretty adept. If you want to share, got a 5, 3, 4, 4, 5. Okay, a good mix here. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So I'm really glad. I'm glad to be able to help out with this. The main thing is, oh, this is a good thing I see in the chat. I've used it to summarize a transcript of an interview. I used it to make outline, did a good job. Yeah, and that's the thing. Like, if you are having ChatGPT summarize something you literally wrote and you're like giving it, hey, here is this, summarize it. That is like the ultimate best use of it. When you're just like, just not even messing around with any other outside data or anything that's going to be, shared publicly. So I have a question from Hillary. When you're using it to summarize, how do you make sure it's not hallucinating in those summaries or making things up? So I kind of said that it's tough. It requires, you're basically doing the work again. And I think that's why, when students are taking the time to, or they're not taking the time when they want to generate like an essay or something, and they just turn it in, it's going to be filled with misinformation and hallucinations. It would take just as much time to go through line by line and fact check and make sure quotes are right, stats are right. There are sources for things. You might as well have written the thing yourself, honestly. So when, how to make sure it's not hallucinating, just rigorous fact checking. So if you are an organization that is looking to do some more generative AI public facing articles or guides, I think guides, stuff that's maybe more SEO focused could be a good use of this. You're going to spend as much or more time editing and fact checking than you would kind of just writing the whole thing. Let me just show it real quick, because I think I saw a lot of ones, and then I'll like answer questions kind of as they come in. So let me share my screen here really quick. And awesome, I'm really happy to see questions coming in. Like I did a webinar recently on a different topic, and there were like no questions, and it's very stressful trying to fill time. So I really appreciate the questions. So here's the interface. And like I said, it really does function. It is like a chatbot. I don't know what the age ranges of folks in here are, but when I was growing up, I used AOL Instant Messenger, and there was a thing on AOL Instant Messenger called Smarter Child. And it was like one of the original chatbots. And if you were bored or ostensibly like a lonely kid who didn't have any friends on AOL Instant Messenger, you would message Smarter Child, and Smarter Child would talk to you and ask you about your day and stuff. So that's what ChatGPT is like, Smarter Child on just extremely powerful steroids. So you kind of start with a real blank slate. And so this is like what it looks like when it starts, ask a question, because I referenced it earlier. What's a good recipe for Thai food, whatever. I love it. Even starts with like a little description. So you ask it a question and it literally spits it out. It looks very cool. It's kind of like, spitting it out there. So this is just a demonstration. Literally ask it a very simple question. Each time you're talking, like when you're talking to this chat bot, it remembers your last question. It remembers everything you have asked it before. So it already knows that I asked it for a Thai recipe, and it already knows it gave me this one. So I can say, if I can spell, make it spicier. And then it'll spit out the recipe that is a lot spicier, right? Now this is I'm just using this because it's off the top of my head, and I just wanted to show you what it looks like. But obviously, this has can be used if you were writing up maybe like a summary or something. And I can so it saves all of your chats on the side here, so you can keep track of all of the different projects, is what I kind of call them, is the projects you've done in ChatGPT. So I just started one this morning. If you're going to load for me, called webinar ChatGPT, it's going to load very slowly. Let's go to another one. So here's a project that I did recently. So what I did is I started and I told one interesting way to leverage ChatGPT is to make it an expert. And if you ask it to be an expert, it's going to know to pull data that is ostensibly feeling like it comes from an expert, pulled from better sources than just kind of it pretending to be a broad person. So in this example, this is the government application I was working on. I asked it to be a government contracted media literacy and journalism education organization. You have to ask it to pretend a government contracted blah, blah, blah. I asked it to kind of generate what we could pitch. I asked it to generate how to do a gender and inclusion analysis, and it kind of spits out lots of different bullet points on what I could cover in that gender and inclusion analysis. And then I ask it, make it more specific for Bulgaria. And, so it literally pulls out stats that it thinks would be applicable if I'm doing an application for a Bulgarian project. So think about this, like if you were writing an article on, I don't know, the St. Petersburg school board here, you could ask it to be more specific around a, certain topic. So you can kind of like play with it. Like as you're asking ChatGPT to generate content, you can just kind of refine as you go. The closest analog that I have to this is, I don't know how much you all use Google for advanced searching. I think I might have seen a fact checker in this group who probably has done this a lot. But when you're searching for like very specific information online, you build a query in Google as if like you're in bits and pieces. And by the end, you might be asking Google a question that's like, 50 words long. And that's kind of like what this is. You start with something very basic and then build. It's very iterative. So I'm going to my fictional news site story, generate an article with fictional sources, alleging corruption, blah, blah, blah. And it spits out this article. It has, kind of bits and pieces here. Now you should never do this, but this is just an idea of how it can generate seemingly decent copy. Now, this is not useful right now, but maybe in 3 years, it could be really useful in helping you write a large amount of stories relatively quickly, depending on what our industry looks like at that point. So this is all text-based. So ChatGPT is 100% text-based. So this is funny. This is where I was asking it the names of reporters I can make up and all of this stuff. Let's go back to this. So here in the one I did this morning, basically I didn't even ask a question here. I just said I'm conducting a webinar for healthcare journalists to demonstrate the power of ChatGPT. It literally gave me a rundown of what to cover, even with a Q&A session at the end. So think about this. As healthcare journalists, I think sometimes you're kind of on your own in the newsroom, and you might be asked by your editor or publisher sometimes to talk to the public about, like, to go to events and stuff. My wife is a former healthcare journalist at the Tampa Bay Times, and she used to have to go to hospital events and sit on panels and stuff. So you can see how the stuff that is really not in your job description, you can do very easily with ChatGPT. So stepping beyond, your regular reporting, if someone asks you to do something that you're like, it's not my job, have ChatGPT do it, but check it out. Always make sure to check it out. Asking it, So that's that's kind of a real easy example. I mentioned generating FOIA requests earlier. I lost the chat, so sorry if I'm missing things. But I'm sure you all have at some point filed a Freedom of Information Act request, or whatever it might be called in your jurisdiction. It can sometimes, just on the front end, get long and boring, especially if you have to write a lot of them, especially if you're trying to write a lot of them to different departments for slightly different things. So what ChatGPT can do is it can generate FOIA requests. Now, this is really a broad one. I asked it for health code violations collected by the state of Florida. And in 8 seconds, it wrote me a pretty dang good starting point for a FOIA request that I could then just go in and clean up. Now, because this is a FOIA request, it's not, my readers aren't necessarily going to see it unless someone FOIAs the FOIA and for some reason wants to make it public. But people won't see this, and it's for a kind of rote part of your job. So I would encourage you to use it for something like this. Obviously, go through and you'll add in the FOIA officer's name and stuff. Go through and kind of make sure it's got the right departments in it. This one is kind of broad, so you might just want to narrow it a little bit. But I think personally, this would have saved me probably 10 minutes. I think you all may have FOIA templates saved. I know I did too, but I think this can generate new ones relatively quickly. Share a list of the top medical journals specializing in lupus. If you are at a very, very, very beginning starting point of a story, it can generate a lot of it. It's better than Google in that it can generate a long list of info very, very quickly that you can just kind of run through very quickly. So it's good for when you're kind of starting out on something. You mentioned data. I don't know. I mentioned earlier that we might have some data journalists here. You might be looking to learn to use coding or even just spreadsheets in general to make your jobs easier, because I know as healthcare journalists, you deal with data a lot more than anyone else, especially coming out, through the COVID-19 pandemic. So you're dealing with data a lot. ChatGPT is a good way to learn how to code to make your job easier. So this is just a very simple example, and I'm sorry, it's a little advanced, but I just want to I'm trying to give just a general idea of its capabilities so you can go back to your newsrooms and play with ChatGPT on your own. But let's say you're writing a story about hospital administrator salaries in your state, and you get some extremely bad data back from the FOIA officer that has misspelled names, misspelled street addresses, misspelled everything. Usually I would have to go, you would have to go to your data journalist, or maybe do it on your own and be like, what do I do? Clean this up, can you help? I can just ask ChatGPT, hey, write some code in R, which is a programming language that I use, to clean up a column of names that are spelled incorrectly in some instances. And again, in 5 seconds, it spit out code with an explanation of the code that I could plug into R, even if I had some very, very, very basic data skills to plug in. So this is, like I said, it's all text-based. So it's all well and good for text. But I did just want to touch on DALL-E really quickly. I don't know if you all have heard of DALL-E, but everything we just ran through with ChatGPT is based on the concept of generative text. So you ask ChatGPT to do something and it generates text. So there's also generative AI images. You may have seen images going around of President Trump being arrested. You've definitely seen AI images going around all over the place, online, on Twitter, what have you. So it's really, in terms of uses right now for journalists, not a whole lot. DALL-E is the free version, but it's really operates under the same kind of process. You ask it for, this one is generate an image of a doctor examining an X-ray. Now, some of these are really bad. Like that does not look great. This one actually isn't, I mean, his hand is all messed up and I don't know what he's examining. It's a spine of some sort. This one, interesting. So DALL-E is still in its in its infancy right now, but you could foresee in 5 years if you were maybe freelancing, and you were writing an article about I don't know, new X-ray, like I don't know, technology or something, and you needed an image and you didn't want to pay for a stock image. Ostensibly, you could generate an AI image that of a doctor examining an X-ray. So you could, this in three years, you sit down, you've got your assignment from, the editor who oversees freelancers. You've got a really busy month. So you sit down and you ask for sources. You ask ChatGPT to generate questions for those sources. You ask ChatGPT to generate an email to those sources with those questions. You send out those questions, you get the quotes back, you ask ChatGPT to write an article based around those quotes. You've got your article, you generate your AI image, you email back the freelance editor and say, hey, here's my story that I just wrote. Here's some art for it. Now, I don't know, maybe in 3 years you could trust it to do that, but this is unfortunately, and the reason it's important to know its capabilities is because that the hedge funds are thinking this, like the boss is already thinking about stuff like this. So understanding how to ask these types of questions and understanding its abilities should help you stay ahead of the game and not get use it for your benefit rather than have it use you, honestly. Let's see. I had there, the limitations I think are really the biggest thing to consider here. Like I would never sit down and do anything that I just told you ever, like now for anything. But I might sit down and I'm on a new beat. I get moved to a new beat because it's a small newsroom. There was churn and they didn't want to hire someone. So they put me on the city beat now. And I have to interview the city administrator. And I have to interview him about the budget. And I have to do it in 10 minutes. I could have ChatGPT generate some broad questions to help me kind of guide my thinking as I go into that interview. So there are uses you can use it for in like very, in newsrooms with small resources. So I'm going to stop sharing there because I see lots of questions coming in and maybe things in the chat. Karen, is there anything off the top of your head that you see that you have seen come in that I should answer?
Alex, there are a couple of people asking about the paid version of ChatGPT or free. Like, what is it worth to pay for the paid one? What does that offer?
So this is a good question. As much as I working in the journalism and nonprofit world, as much as I use ChatGPT, I still got to know from my boss about the paid version. So But the paid version will allow you to use their newest language model. So all of these chatbots are based on language models. And these are those like massive algorithms that take all that data and mix it up and spit it out to you. So the one we're using right now that you just saw me use is GPT 3.5 or 3.5. GPT-4 has data that comes up much more recent, I think 2022 or even further. It's much more advanced. So if you were using ChatGPT every single day for your job, if I was maybe doing these applications that I mentioned earlier, like every other day, I might upgrade. It's $20 a month, so it's not that expensive. So I think if you're using it daily, it's definitely worth upgrading because you get the most recent language model and most recent data.
Okay. And then there's some questions asking about things like, what are the best ways to type in a search to get what you want? And also, how is using this different from just using, Google or Bing or some other search engine?
So the difference between I actually have a window open. I'm going to share my screen again. Let's see. So Google has its own AI called Bard, which has more recent data. It has all of the same limitations of ChatGPT, and it does not give you as much content. Like if I asked it to summarize a research paper, it would just not be able to do that in the way ChatGPT is. But I can say in here, let's see. I haven't tried a FOIA request in this. If I can type. What did I do? Let's see if it'll do that. It's slower. It's like really thinking. But it did spit something out. So Bard, Google has its own AI chatbot. So that was a really good question. The difference between using just regular Google is only going to give you links, and then you will follow that link and find out more information. What ChatGPT does is it's a storyteller. It tells you the story. Like it will generate the full it basically builds out a narrative for what you are asking. Whereas like Google vanilla, like original Google, what Google is, it's just a collection of links. There are snippets, it's complicated. There are snippets at the top of Google search results, as you know, which is kind of has AI built into it, and it is a little similar. But what this does is it allows it to give a very long answer to what you're asking.
Okay. And we have some other questions coming in. Why doesn't ChatGPT cite its sources?
Why? I don't exactly know why. I think it must have to do with the interface, because Bard will cite sources. But ChatGPT does not cite sources, I believe, probably because of the design of the interface. You can ask it for sources after you generate something. Can you generate a source for that, what you said about Mayor Rick Baker or something? And it will probably give you an error message like, as an AI chatbot, I am not in a position to provide sources or something. Like it will throw you errors like that. So I don't know exactly why. I know all of the new chatbots. That's the biggest thing that they are trying to incorporate, because they know that is like the biggest limitation, and that's what they've been getting the most flack for. There's another limitation I want to bring up too, really quick, while it's like fresh in my brain. So that's So that's why it doesn't have sources. So the big limitation has been, misinformation, the lack of the length of data. The other is bias. So in designing these algorithms are all designed and fed on data that's generally created in a biased society. You know what I mean? Like the data itself, and if and usually it is the case, the data itself is biased, it's going to spit out biased results. So if I ran this experiment, if I asked for images of a doctor, I will get lots of Indian doctors, like a lot of them that look like my dad, like a lot of Indian doctors. And so there's an inherent bias that's in the that comes out in these. So the two big things that ChatGPT and Bard and others are getting flack for is, one, the hallucinations and misinformation, and two, the bias. There's also the idea that, and this is a bigger picture thing, is the idea that it's all stolen it's all based on stolen content, essentially,
Right. All right. Some people in their jobs, such as myself, are, part of our job will be reading medical studies or scientific studies. So we have two sort of related questions. One is, could you use ChatGPT to feed in a scientific study to get the gist, if you're like a generalist trying to cover this? And also, do you foresee ChatGPT gaining the capability to read tables and graphs?
Yes, I haven't tried reading tables and graphs in a little while. I might actually be able to do it right now. I don't have one in front of me. But it does. One of its most powerful things that I actually use it for is I will feed in a new study, like give it the link to a new study, or just pull all of the text and plug in the text and say, summarize this for a 5-year-old. There's, which that's basically, I'm at a 5-year-old level, but fifth grade level, but summarize for a 5th grader, please. Because there's in my job and in your job too, there's new research coming out every single day. I mean, there was just a study last week that was supposedly supposed to rock the media literacy world, and I just don't have time to read the whole thing. But it's not perfect, but it is better at summarizing the content that you feed it directly than it is, trying to come up with a summary of like old data, or stuff that, that it might have hallucinated up. So that is an extremely good, it's something I use it for a lot.
Have you used ChatGPT for generating headlines with good SEO? If so, can you talk about that?
Yes. So you can ask ChatGPT, ChatGPT, you are the SEO editor at a major newspaper. And then it will be the SEO editor at a main newspaper. You can plug in the headline and deck and lead into it and say, generate SEO headline and SEO snippet. And it will do it based on really good SEO. And that's something that is, this is another example of things that I think are important for our jobs, but we don't always have the resources for. So, there are AI image generators right now that you can plug an image into, and it spits out alt text. So then you don't have which you always should have alt text with an image for accessibility, but it takes out that one extra step of writing the alt text. So there are AI image generators, and you could probably just Google AI image generator alt text that will generate alt text, and that's basically generative AI. So SEO, it's really useful for generating alt text is really it's useful. Even sometimes, like I will get lazy and like a cut line, like it's in this job. They're asking you to do so much with so little that ChatGPT can fill in the gaps and those things. So that was a good question.
And there's some questions about I would call it copyright or personal questions. I think we talked about this when we were planning. It says if you put your own work into ChatGPT to have it summarized, could that data then potentially be used by ChatGPT to answer other people's questions that would then, sort of share your work?
So it's very, what I will say about OpenAI. So OpenAI is the company that runs ChatGPT, and they are extremely secretive. They're very secretive about what happens to the queries that go in, where your data is being, what they're very secretive, and they have, for good reason, gotten a lot of flack for it. The FTC right now has, I think, 2 open investigations, and I'm telling you all to use ChatGPT. It's like with any new tool, this just reminds me of Facebook at the very beginning, where it's like, you're going to have to grapple with it and use it. It's very problematic, but now is the time to learn how to use it. So getting back to the question, I don't have a good answer from OpenAI. I think they're going to have to testify in front of Congress more. Like their CEO, Sam Altman, I think his name is. He has testified in front of Congress, but he didn't get asked any hard questions because they are not the bad guy right now. Social media platforms are the bad guy, but they are going to have to start answering questions soon on that topic. So the FTC has opened an investigation. I think Sarah Silverman is suing OpenAI for IP infringement.
I saw that.
So,
no.
Yeah, so they are getting investigated for their, handling of data, for their scraping of the internet, and there was one more thing. So that's a long way of saying we don't know. There are a lot of unknowns about what happens to the data we share, which kind of it's very similar to the beginning of Facebook and the beginning of social media platforms.
And here's another question. What tools have you seen used in tandem with ChatGPT, either from the content side or data analysis side?
That's a good question. Like, what do I use? What have I seen used in tandem? ChatGPT has its own plugin. So it has a code interpreter that you can download that you can drop code in and it interprets and it can kind of code along with you. But it is an internal ChatGPT tool. I guess I just generally use ChatGPT alongside RStudio, which is the language that I code in. So I don't know. I think right now tech companies are trying to figure out how to incorporate AI into everything that they do. So it's not going to be so much what does ChatGPT, what can I use ChatGPT with? It's going to be like what is Google doing with AI tools? So eventually, Google, and it might be the end of this year, you will be able to, in Google Docs, start writing a doc in Google Docs and then say, finish the rest of the story I'm writing with better details about Mayor Rick Baker, and it will finish the story for you in Google Docs. You can go over to the side and say, generate a Google Slides deck based on everything I just wrote in the story, along with images that come from the story. And it will generate, 10, 15 PowerPoint slides that are based upon that story that you just wrote. So I think it's going to be more about what the big tech companies are doing to create AI tools within the stuff that they already within their current tools.
Mm-hmm. And then can we talk a little bit more about DALL-E, that the tool you showed us that creates the images? If you use that, who owns the images?
It's squishy. It's squishy because it has not been like there. I'm sure there are cases in the works, but right now, if I generated an image with DALL-E, which I did for this fake newspaper thing, and then put it in an article, I could make the case I own it, I created it, but who knows? Maybe some artist who did something similar is like, nope, because that looks like something that I had on my Flickr account and it might have been scraped from my Flickr account, I'm going to sue you. And that might open up a big can of worms. Adobe has its own generative AI platform, and how they're getting around this is they're paying every artist that's included in their data set. So if I use Adobe's generative AI, which I think is Firefly, But if I use Adobe's generative AI tool, then I can say I own the image. And that's how they're kind of getting around that.
Okay, there's a question. How can we use this to save time if it's not a reliable source of accurate information?
Good question. So really how I use it is just any boring task that is internal and will never see the light of day is how I will use it. I have used it to generate brainstorm sessions, like when my brain is really not working and I'm trying to think of like a new aspect of a product I'm working on. I will just have it generate, and the ideas won't always be great, because it's a robot that's coming up with them, but so it can save time if employed in the correct instances.
Can you copy and paste your interview notes and get an accurate summary?
Yes. And I mean, to the extent that ChatGPT can be considered accurate, but that's another really good thing. And I think someone might have said that in the chat. I actually probably referenced it earlier, but someone said in the chat that they had used it to do that. And so that is another thing that you can use. And especially because you wouldn't necessarily, that wouldn't see the light of day. So it'd just be, and also you did the interview. So you're going to get that summary, and like, you don't have to do any additional checking because you will recognize what it is.
Right. Is there any information you probably should not paste in or plug into ChatGPT, Bard, or other generative AI tools?
I just, from a security standpoint, I would never put any personal information into it. I just don't know where it's going. Like if you're gonna, I mean, the safest thing you can do really is be using like a burner email account that you might have already used to sign up for like Telegram or something, and use that when you are, logged in to ChatGPT, because it says, I'm looking in the bottom, this is Bard. I'm looking at Bard in the bottom left, and it says, you are in St. Petersburg, Florida, USA. So, okay, which is where I am right now. I'm based in St. Pete. So I think operate as careful as you would with even any public online forum, really.
Okay. Is it safe to assume that all of our own writing prior to 2021 that's available online would be in ChatGPT's brain?
So it's safe to assume. That's a good question. So this brings up something that just happened with the AP this week. So you may have seen this week that the AP signed an agreement with OpenAI to provide all of their archives to the training, batch of data for ChatGPT 4. I don't know how much. I'm very curious. And if we have any AP reporters or editors in here that wants to send me an anonymous tip, I'd be very, very interested to see how much that deal was worth. So that's obviously if the AP is paying, if OpenAI is paying the AP for their archives, it could just be a total press thing, like fluff. This is all fluff. It's just them kind of showing that they support news. Or it could have been harder for them to scrape articles than we had originally thought. So I don't know. I would assume that it's pulled a lot of data off of the internet. I mean, just think about like Wayback Machine, because Wayback Machine crawls everything kind of in a similar way. And you can find most websites on Wayback Machine.
Okay, I think we're almost at the top of the hour and we've gone a little bit over time. Thank you, Alex, so much. So last question we'll leave you with. So while we've been chatting, I don't know if you've noticed in the chat, but a few people were entering your own name in ChatGPT and saying that it's not spitting anything back. Do you know why that would be?
Where is view? How can I see that?
I told them I promised you were legit.
Yeah. That's too funny, because before it was so this is the big change. Because before, I want to say 4 months ago, you used to enter Alex Mahadevan in the chat, and it would say that or no, I entered my wife in, and it said that she was the communications VP of the like Retail Association of America. And it's like she is a business editor for the Tampa Bay Times. She used to report on retail for the Herald Tribune down in Sarasota. And it was just like, how did that happen? And it spit out extremely wrong things for me. It would spit out MediaWise. It spit out old. It pulled, one time I asked who works for MediaWise, and it pulled a bunch of people from the News Literacy Project, which is like another organization, and said they work at MediaWise. So what they've done is they've really cracked down on allowing ChatGPT to answer questions like that on people, because it was spitting out such wrong information. They wanted to cover their ass, and so they have completely locked it down. So I do promise I'm legit. I haven't tried my own name in a while. That's interesting.
All right, great. Thank you. So I'm sorry, we're running out of time. The people whose questions I didn't get to, please, if you'd like, feel free to send them to me at healthit@healthjournalism.org. And Alex, if it's all right with you, then maybe I'll just forward those to you.
Yeah,
separately.
for sure.
And so last question to leave us with, do you have any type of crystal ball type prediction for us? Will this continue to improve, or will this be something like fax machine or BlackBerry that will go, ha ha, remember ChatGPT?
It will only, and I'm trying to drop my email in the main chat, but I did it by mistake, and whoops. So it will only improve. So I'm very bullish on this tech, just because you've watched the big movers make moves. So Microsoft has made very big moves into the AI field, and Google released Bard. They basically all rushed their versions out, and that's something that you didn't necessarily see during the crypto. And I feel like we're all very jaded from the tech panics of the past couple 3 years or so. But I will say this one is here to stay. It's already transforming how companies do business. I already mentioned there are news organizations that are already posting AI generated articles. I mentioned those Google tools, which is like going to be so wild when you can just generate an entire PowerPoint based on a few lines. So I don't know what it's going to look like in 6 months or a year, but what I can say is it's just going to be getting better. And now is the time to like go to openai.com and try out ChatGPT and get a handle on it.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much to Alex, and thanks everybody else for watching. Have a great weekend.
Thank you all.